This week on the Salesforce Admins podcast, we were talking with Lizz Hellinga about why clean data is so important for AI. Lizz is a consultant and Salesforce MVP, and before you think, I could skip this, it's probably going to be boring. Let me tell you, this is a fun conversation because you're going to learn about different types of bad data. One of them is super fun to understand. Also, Lizz shares with us a lot of tips and tools for cleaning up your bad data and also making things a little bit more easy for your users. So I really enjoy this conversation. But before we get in the episode, can you just be sure that you're following the Salesforce Admins podcast on iTunes or just wherever you get your podcasts? That way, you get a new episode every Thursday right on your phone. So with that, let's get to the conversation with Lizz. So Lizz, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Mike, for inviting me. I am thrilled to be here.
It's been a while since you've been on and a part of the team, but we had Jennifer Lee down at Florida Dreamin', and she slacked me. Oh my God, Mike, you have to talk to Lizz about her Florida Dreamin' session and clean data and get her on the podcast. That's literally word for word what she said. So I listen to my team members when they have good suggestions, and wanted to get back on the podcast and talk about clean data and why it's important. But before we do that, what have you been up to?
Yeah, it's been a busy time. I've been, consulting for a couple of years now and just building that and enjoying working with customers on their Salesforce challenges. And then I did move to Michigan. So I am enjoying the Michigander lifestyle, which includes winter, which is coming.
Yeah, you're north of the cold air line.
Exactly. But it's beautiful. Yeah. So we're in Holland.
Yeah. And you get all the seasons.
We do.
I like the seasons.
Yes.
Yep. We talked, I hinted you had a great presentation at Florida Dreamin' about clean data. And especially now with AI, I guess we need clean data. I don't know, Lizz. Do we need clean data? I mean, we've always needed clean data, right? Like I'm supposed to clean my room.
Yes. I mean, we always needed clean data. We always need clean data. But it is now not optional, right? You need to have clean data because with generative AI, it's table stakes. So if your data is not ready for generative AI, your business isn't ready. And I read that amazing quote from a McKinsey report about data and being ready for AI. But I will say, before we get too far into this, I was inspired to discuss data because of a podcast that you all shared, not once but twice, with Sarah Flemian on generative AI. And listening to that, and I started to think about, well, what can I do to help the orgs that I'm involved in be ready for AI? And doing my research, I came across this McKinsey article that talks about, if your data isn't ready for generative AI, your business isn't ready. And I thought, well, gosh, not all of this is new, right? Like having your data and your clean data approach isn't something that's new to Salesforce admins. It just is becoming more important now because of the way that data is consumed to create, generative AI outputs.
Yeah, I think it was always, okay, well, this report's wrong, so I need to fix it. Or, kind of as issues play whack-a-mole, right, with data. If that comes up, then we'll deal with it. Or if there's imports that are going sour, then we'll kind of deal with it. But now that we're on the precipice of having these discussions, I feel like the second discussion, besides what are we going to use AI for, is exactly what you brought up. Is it ready? Have you ran a report? Can we even have AI tell us if we've got a good enough phone number list?
Exactly. And so that leads to my first question in the presentation that I shared with the audience was, what really is bad data? What is poor quality data? And some of the common ones, right? Duplicate data, inaccurate data that we see, incomplete data, that's a huge challenge usually, stale data, and my new favorite, hoarded data. So almost having too much data, not going through and maybe cleaning up, archiving, removing data from your system.
Oh, I feel like that could be the next show on TLC, data hoarders.
I have seen where I've been in orgs where people will have 600,000 contacts in there and maybe only use about 30,000 at a given time. So
is that what you mean by hoarded data?
Yes.
Okay.
Just maintaining or keeping data in there that may not be relevant.
Just afraid to throw it away.
Yeah,
I mean, we got it, right?
Mm-hmm.
At some point you paid for a list or did a trade show, had a fishbowl out there.
Exactly. And then they just never go through to clean it and remove it. And sometimes there's resistance to doing that. It just depends on the org and the leadership, and that changes at times.
Yeah. Or I could see this. I bet there's no policy for hoarded data.
True.
To really sit down and like what, Liz, you do a lot of consulting. You sit down, well, what is the last time you've contacted them? And then setting that as a timeline and, okay, maybe contacts older than that. Now, this is our policy, much in the same way of data retention.
Exactly. And it's the same type of conversation. And it's important that, as an admin, that you and your stakeholders agree on how you define that data. How do you retain it? What do you define as poor quality or bad data?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to work with your stakeholders to do that. But there's ways that you can start the conversation because it can feel daunting, and reporting is the best place to start.
Now, as we did, or as you mentioned, the types of bad data with hoarded data, as you would go through and create different applications, would you include maybe some of those policies or procedures in that documentation? Right? Like I'm thinking if we're creating maybe one-off delivery records as they would apply to an opportunity, for example, we probably don't need to keep that for very long, maybe a year or two, as part of a data retention policy. But would you include kind of like what the definition of hoarded data in your process documentation?
I would. And you have to have a data governance policy. I mean, at least an outline, and you have to start somewhere with it, or else it could get unruly and out of control. And I mean, many orgs do have that, where they're just not as diligent about maintaining it because they're only working on the records that they're focused on at that time.
Right.
And it can become pretty easy. And so that's why as an admin, it is your role to think through these things and build the reports and have the discussions around what this means and sort of push that rock forward within your company.
Yeah. And I think, as we think through the use of AI and cleaning data, anytime you do data cleanup as a topic, whether it's a blog post or a podcast, I'm sure, we're 8 or so minutes in, I'd be surprised half the people are listening because the other half are like, I don't want to listen to that. I know I got to do it. It's like almost weight loss. Yes, you need to do it for all of your data, but I would think with AI, you would really want to prioritize the data that you're going to expose as part of your use with AI, right?
Yes. And I would start with your key processes that you want to use AI to support. So if you're thinking about your sales process, that's a big topic that comes up quite a bit. How can sales reps use AI for contacting clients or knowing when to contact clients and what to contact them about? I would start by documenting that process and really highlighting what are the essential data points within that journey. So whether it's what contact information is essential, what account information, what opportunity data will help drive those generative insights. And you can start there and to start even just simply building some reports that examines that information. Do you have the email addresses? Do you have correct roles and titles? Are you contacted? Like, are you using, last activity date, things like that to help you start to see how healthy that data is. So it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You could start with just a few basic objects to get that going.
Yeah. And then once you kind of have those reports and you figure out the level of uncleanliness that you have, what's out there for admins to kind of work on and pick away and get that data cleaned up?
There's a couple of things that you can do, starting today. So reports and dashboards, right, are the springboard for it, but you can have fun with it, kind of gamify it and, use one Salesforce Labs application that I like is called Clean Your Room Dashboard. That just is a springboard dashboard with components that help you examine your the fields that you find important for AI or for your processes. You can use those to start a competition of like, who's going to have the cleanest data and, fun things like that. Obviously you have to work with your stakeholders, but having people focus on updating some of the key fields makes it a lot easier than having them say like, oh my gosh, you got to clean up all 1,000 accounts that are in your territory.
Right.
Like nobody wants to do that. So, just highlight the things that are most important. And it could be, even if you're looking at deals this quarter, or deals this for the 6 months, opportunities they're set to close in the next 6 months, getting them to at least update things that are in flight will be hugely beneficial. And then it's about helping them build those habits. They'll start to update other things when they, have to update those few.
What do you, because I want to pause on that for a beat here. Anytime I've asked salespeople to update stuff, it's, it's this quarter, or it's almost the end of the quarter, or it's this, or a million excuses, right? And I'm sure you've ran into it too. How do you, I love the idea of gamifying it. And I think that's something that an admin could really get an executive to help, be behind, and they can push out. What is your advice for kind of rolling that out? And that also helps with scale when you gamify data cleaning in terms of timing that admins could suggest.
There's a couple of things that you could do. Obviously, the executive support is huge. Really talking about the why. Like this is a journey, and it is going to become a competitive imperative. Like they have no choice to really, but if they want to take advantage of AI, they have to have updated data, and it will eventually make their roles easier so that they could potentially target more customers more quickly, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to sell that long game sometimes, but use gamifying a little bit, getting a Starbucks gift card or some kind of treat goes a long way. People like to be rewarded, even if it's not something expensive. Like people like that recognition.
Right. I think we always talk about cleaning data in the sense of, there's bad data in there, but it's also a little bit like, how do we prevent shoveling in a snowstorm, to use a Midwest term, because we're Midwesterners here.
Right.
But once you do have everything shoveled, now how do you prevent more bad data from accumulating? So there's the proactive or reactive of running reports and fixing stuff. But what do you see as being on the proactive side so that we can start making sure that it's cleaner data coming in?
Yes, there's so many tools that admins can use for this. And one of my favorites is Path. So Sales Path, putting those key fields that you deem necessary at front and center as they're managing their opportunity lifecycle. The highlights panel is another area that you can use on a page layout to highlight key fields, again, that are essential. Or I've even done this where I've done like a quality of data rating in the highlights panel using flows and formula fields. Dynamic forms can help support the data entry process as well as screen flows. And then another thing that is great too is just the email integration, either using Einstein activity capture or the Outlook or Google plugin with Salesforce is huge. It makes it a lot easier for people to get the data in and accurate. So thinking more, I guess, putting on your user experience hat when you're thinking about the requirements for your teams will help you, to your point that you always say, Salesforce administration by walking around. So sitting with them, thinking about what their user experience is and figuring out ways within the tool that you can make it easier for them to enter the data. Sometimes it's just as simple as moving a field up the screen page layout. So above the fold, it could be that simple. Other times, it could be, thinking about dynamic forms and something a little bit more sophisticated.
Yeah, I think I love the idea of Sabois. I just didn't contextualize it right because Sabois is really about personalization as opposed to customization, and the difference being scale.
Right.
And what you're talking about there is also thinking through when you're working with users to get better implementation. And maybe it is moving a field. Like I recall for a call center, they 100% wanted all of the fields lined up on the left side of the page, which wasn't hard, right? In the edit field, you could edit the page layout because it just didn't make sense to them to go left, right, left, right, left, right, right? They just bang, 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 bang. What was interesting is then you also have to think through were other teams using that? And the sales team, it did not work for the sales team. They were used to seeing left, right, left, right, left, right. And so one of the things that we talk about, which is why I'm hung on this, is you get these ideas for personalization, but you can't confuse them with customization because there is ways to make it easier for that one particular user that doesn't affect the productivity of all of your users.
Right. And that's where, page layouts, dynamic forms, all those things can help with that process so that, using the tools in your admin toolkit, right, that can help you think about it from almost like a persona-driven approach.
Yeah, I think this is the interesting conversation that most people don't have as the follow-up to, there's a whole bunch of AI stuff and how are we using it? And the second part is, but are we ready to use it? It's almost like everybody's having a house party. Let's have a house party. And nobody looks around to be like, we better clean the house first.
Right. Make sure everything's in its right spot. Make sure we have plenty of napkins and cups.
Yeah. And
it's true.
Because we're so interested in just like, let's use AI and then it'll fix everything.
Right. And it's all good until something happens that isn't good. And then they're like, why is this not working the way we intended? It's like, well, we've got to go back and we've got to clean these things up. And it's interesting because it's a very hot topic and it makes people nervous too, a little bit. There's some hesitancy and there's some I still don't fully understand generative AI.
I think like 3 people do in the world.
Right. And so it's what do I know is most important to help us be ready for that. And to me, it's thinking about the quality of the data in the system so that when we are confident to make those decisions and investments in using generative AI in Salesforce, we're ready. So, because it's going to take a little bit to get people on the same page and ready for it. But you don't want it to fail because you haven't spent the time thinking about the backbone to me, which is the data quality.
Right. No, it's comparable. I was reading somewhere. This has an ending. I was reading somewhere that Glengarry Glen Ross, the movie with Alec Baldwin and Jack Lemmon, was actually it was ranked up there as one of the something. I forget what it was at the top of the list for. And I bring it up because it is they point this out in the article, very specific time in sales and technology in the United States where salespeople had individual Rolodexes on their desk.
Yeah.
And that was the value that that person brought to the organization. And this almost feels like the same precipice, because can you imagine at some point, every organization went from salespeople with Rolodexes to, we're all going to take this data and share it, and you're all going to have access to it. But I promise you, every single person's Rolodex, those cards look different and had different notes, right? And now we have to clean this up so that we can all be unified to be in one CRM. Now, fast forward how many years later, and now that we're in that CRM, this is almost like, how do we get that clean data to the next level so that AI can jump in? Because I'm sure at that time, most people looked around and said, I don't know how a CRM works. Much like you said, I don't know how the AI works.
Right. I mean, I had a really amazing manager say to me, probably in 2017, maybe 2016. No, it was probably 2015.
Wow.
She said, our data in our CRM, our goal for it is to be an asset. And I feel like she was years ahead saying that to me, because I keep reflecting on that phrase within the last, I'd say just 6 months, realistically, as we start to think about how we can use AI with Salesforce, with our CRM data. How is it an asset that it will help us reach our customers, reach potential customers in a targeted, genuine approach?
Yeah, data is an asset. She's light years ahead.
Yeah, she was.
There might not even be companies that know that now.
Right. And I remember her saying that, and it really, like, as I worked on this presentation for Florida Dreamin' and thinking about, like, how do we turn it into it needs to be an asset before we can even dip our toes in the world of generative AI.
You would argue, and companies forget this too, but it is the one thing that is always sellable. When companies close down or they get acquired, you could say, well, it's the manufacturing plant. No, I mean, you live in Michigan, just go across the state to Detroit and look at how many empty manufacturing plants there are. They didn't buy the company because of the manufacturing plant. They didn't buy the company because of the raw steel that they had in inventory. They bought it arguably for the brand, but also the data.
Right.
That's something every company has. A list of people they sold to and what they bought. And
their longevity with them.
Right. Yeah. Or lack thereof longevity. There's a lot to tackle. The one thing that I always love to ask people, because I feel like it could be walking into a hoarder's house and you don't know where to start. Journey of 1,000 miles starts with one footstep. For admins that listen to this and think, okay, maybe we have or have not started the conversation about we're going to use AI. Needless to say, I should start the conversation about cleaning up data. Where would you start? What would be the next thing that Lizz would do after listening to this podcast?
We've said it a couple of times. I think begin with reports and dashboards, start to examine the data, maybe build some baseline reports, because your next move will need to be to have some conversations with stakeholders. So speak with leadership, your main stakeholders, trying to think of the right word, but the main people that you work with that that use the system. Start to define what is your bad data, because it's not so much like I may come in and say, oh, you haven't talked to them in 2 years, but your deal cycle may be 3 years, or there may be some different things that go on within your organization that are unique and different. So I may think something's stale because we haven't talked to them in 3 months, but to you, your org, it could be a year. So determining what really is poor quality, low quality, bad data in your system. So whether it's, obviously duplicates, usually inaccurate, incomplete, stale, hoarded. And you can kind of flip that and say, what is the most important data about our customers that's in Salesforce? And how do we make sure that people are able to update it accurately on a regular basis? Those are a couple of things to think about. So reports, gather your stakeholders. Reports usually will help you do that because it kind of shines a light on the problem areas. The next thing, thinking about your process. What data points are key throughout maybe your opportunity life cycle, your case life cycle? Thinking about those things will help you identify the essential data points in that journey. And that's where you'll want to begin because it can be overwhelming. You may have 150 fields on your account page. I guarantee that not all of those are essential to the data journey in relation to maybe the opportunity life cycle. So think about those processes and what are the key points of data. And then embark on that journey of cleaning the data, but then also put on your user experience hat and think about how your end users are updating, adding, creating data in the system, and see what you can do to help drive towards those key data points so that they're easily able to update them.
I think that's very actionable stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited to keep talking about this.
I can tell.
There's so many things that you can do with promoting quality data within your system. But these are tactical things, but there's also long-term, like with data governance, that you can start to be a leader. It's a way to elevate your role yourself within your organization because you're seeing this. It's clean data is the imperative now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast and hopefully inspiring us to clean up our data and not be data hoarders.
Yes, please. We don't need a TV show on that.
I mean, we kind of do. I just like to see how they do it. I think that would be fun.
It would be it would be interesting to see all that.
Because you kind of need that IT guy coming over and saying, move. Oh my God. You have 60,000 contacts in your Outlook. What are you doing?
Right.
Just something funny like that.
Clean those up.
Right.
I know.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks so much.
So I love that discussion with Liz. I think her line, the tactics aren't anything new. It's just more urgent now, is completely true. With the precipice of a new, really transformational technology coming our way, on top of just having clean data being important, really making sure that our organizations and ourselves can be successful with AI as this comes about is super important. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, I need you to do one thing, and that is share it with somebody you think would appreciate listening to it. If you're listening on iTunes, you can just tap the dots and choose share episode. Then you can post it to social or text it to that friend. If you're looking for more great resources, your one stop for everything admin is admin.salesforce.com, including a transcript of the show. And be sure to join our conversation in the Admin Trailblazer group. That's over on the Trailblazer community. And of course, the links are in the show notes. So until next week, we'll see you in the cloud.